From NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida, you're watching live coverage of the launch of NOAA's Geostationary Operational Environmental Satellite S, also known as GOES-S, second in the series of the nation's most advanced fleet of geostationary weather satellites. Hi, I'm Tori McClendon. Thanks for joining us. Today's launch of the United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket is scheduled to lift off at 5:02 p.m. Eastern Time with a 2-hour launch window from Space Launch Complex 41. In just over 30 minutes from now, the Atlas V will send NOAA's newest geostationary satellite into orbit. Let's now go to Josh Finch and Mike Curie, who are standing by inside Atlas Launch Control for more information on today's launch. Josh and Mike, how are things looking so far?
Thank you, Tori. Mike and I are here in the Atlas Space Flight Operations Center, also called the ASOC, which is on Cape Canaveral Air Force Station.
And the ASOC overlooks Space Launch Complex 41, where the Atlas V rocket is poised for liftoff at 5:02 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Inside of the ASOC, NASA Launch Manager Tim Dunn and United Launch Alliance Launch Director Tom Heater are working closely with the entire launch teams as we continue to count down to liftoff.
The launch teams began arriving on console this morning, and they've been working through launch procedures since then. The team received a weather briefing from the U.S. Air Force 45th Space Wing Launch Weather Officer Clay Flynn. The weather folks take a look at all kinds of constraints, luckily none of which we have to deal with today. They look at wind speed, cloud coverage, the potential for thunderstorms or lightning in the surrounding area, and even solar weather, which launch teams need to know before committing to launch. But as you see, we have a 90% go weather forecast with only a 10% probability of violating the launch constraint of cumulus clouds. Launch Weather Officer Clay Flynn is not concerned about that at this time. Winds are 20 to 25 knots from the west-southwest, temperature of 80 degrees, and we have a go forecast at this time for launch.
Right now you're looking at a live view of the launch pad and the Atlas V and its 541 configuration. The Atlas V is a 2-stage rocket, and the number 541 indicates a couple of key features about the rocket that will power NOAA's GOES-S weather satellite into orbit.
The 5 indicates a 5-meter fairing. Inside that protective cover is where the weather satellite is safely tucked away for launch. The 4 indicates the number of solid rocket boosters attached to the rocket's core, and the 1 indicates a single-engine Centaur upper stage rocket. Thus, the 541, one of the most powerful rockets in the Atlas V fleet.
Yesterday, February 28th, the Atlas V rocket, along with NOAA's GOES-S weather satellite, was moved from the United Launch Alliance Vertical Integration Facility, or VIF, to the launch pad.
The Atlas V rocket segments make their way to the Cape over land and water. The large Atlas booster and the Centaur second stage arrive on a boat called the Mariner. The Atlas rocket booster, the upper stage called the Centaur, the solid rocket boosters and the satellite, already encapsulated inside the protective fairing, are built up vertically over a series of weeks. The rocket, fully mated, rolled on the mobile launch platform to the launch pad yesterday.
There's less than a mile between where the Atlas rocket is fully built up and where the pad will launch the rocket. Still, the roll takes about 30 minutes. Afterward, the rocket was secured into place and technicians fueled the Atlas booster with RP-1, a rocket-grade kerosene, and completed all service connections from the launch site to the rocket. These connections provide power, fuel, and more to the rocket and spacecraft prior to launch.
Today, the crew began the power-on sequence for both the GOES spacecraft and the Atlas V rocket. The crew is performing final preparations of the Atlas V power-on and electrical checks, including super-cold cryogenic propellants on board the Atlas V. Liquid oxygen goes into the oxidizer tanks of the first and second stages, and then liquid hydrogen into the fuel tank of the second stage Centaur. Final flight control tests will be performed along with final tests with the Eastern Range instrumentation, and then we will be ready for launch.
Right now, we are at T-minus 12 minutes, 12 seconds and counting. All fueling operations are underway. The Atlas V booster is being filled with liquid oxygen and RP-1, a rocket-grade kerosene. The fuel that will power the first stage's RD-180 engine, which produces more than 860,000 pounds of thrust. The Centaur upper stage also is being filled with liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen. The Centaur upper stage is powered by a single Aerojet Rocketdyne RL-10 engine. The tanks are expected to reach flight levels at T-minus 5 minutes.
Things are progressing well toward liftoff at 5:02 p.m. We do have a 2-hour launch window should that become necessary for tonight's launch attempt. But at this time, we are not aware of working any technical issues, and weather is go. So there's lots going on, and while we follow the action here in Atlas Launch Control, we go back to Tori for more on NOAA's GOES-S mission. Tori?
Thanks, Mike. On today's broadcast, you will hear from program managers from NOAA and NASA to learn about the GOES-S spacecraft and how it fits into the GOES satellite system. You will hear more about the Atlas V rocket and its liftoff capability from United Launch Alliance. You will also hear from NASA's Launch Services Program representatives who will further explain why the ULA Atlas V rocket was selected for this spacecraft and also learn more about their mission. Their role in this mission. NOAA's GOES-S satellite launching today is part of a 4-satellite program called the GOES-R series that includes GOES-R, now GOES-16, GOES-S, T, and U. GOES-S will be renamed GOES-17 once it reaches geostationary orbit. The GOES-R series is NOAA's latest and greatest and the GOES satellite system and will extend its operational availability through 2036. These highly sophisticated weather satellites will provide significantly enhanced weather forecasting capabilities across the Western Hemisphere. NASA Edge has spent a lot of time with the GOES team leading up to today's launch. Chris Gersh is on the set right now with Ed Grigsby, the GOES-R Deputy System Program Director from NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. Chris?
Hey, thanks, Tori. Ed, hey, great to be back on the show here.
It's incredibly exciting, isn't it?
About 16 months ago, you were right here talking about GOES-R, which is now GOES-16, and now we're getting ready to set launch for the next satellite. How are you feeling right now?
Oh, this is amazing. This is amazing.
Now the satellite itself, I mean, has a lot of capability. Not only looking at the Earth, but looking at the Sun. Let's look at the Earth first. Tell us some of the capabilities of the satellite.
So this satellite, just like GOES-R, which is now GOES-16 on the East Coast, GOES-S is going to become GOES-17 on the West Coast. And just like that system, it has an ABI, the Advanced Baseline Imager, which is, from previous generations, 5 times greater, faster,
right.
4 times the resolution, 3 times the spectral content. It provides high definition.
That's crazy. I mean, it's crazy. And the fact that, the GOES-S, or which will be GOES-17, will be covering from, the continental U.S. all the way to New Zealand.
It will. It will. The combination of 16 to 17 really completes the NOAA constellation for them for the East and West Coast, just like the GOES constellation always has.
Right.
And it's going to cover the African coast, all the way through New Zealand, even high latitudes that we've never seen before, Alaska.
And covering the Sun.
And covering the Sun. The solar platform covers the Sun.
Now, when we were back at Goddard about a month or 2 ago, you told a great story how GOES saves lives. Could you share with the audience that story?
Oh, it's amazing. It really is amazing. So let's see. There are several good stories out there, but the best one that I recall is Hurricane Maria. When it hit landfall in Puerto Rico, it wiped out their radar. And GOES-16, even though we weren't operational, we're still in test mode, it actually took over for the radar and provided all the emergency managers with the information they needed.
That's incredible. And what are you expecting here in less than 20 minutes?
It's going to be amazing. It is going to be amazing.
Well, Ed, there's a lot of instruments. Now, looking at the Sun, what are some of the key features of the satellite looking at the Sun?
So we have SUVI, SICE, and EXIS, and we have a magnetometer, which covers the magnetosphere. Right. But SUVI takes pictures in several spectral regions of the Sun itself and looks for coronal mass ejections. Right. Along with EXIS and SICE, they measure some of the heavy protons and ions that come from the Sun. So we know that solar weather environment really well.
Well, Ed, I tell you what, this is an exciting time. Another great launch coming up for GOES-S,
yes,
and afterwards we have GOES-T.
GOES-T in 2020.
So we want you back here in a couple of years, when we launch
I'm
GOES
looking
T,
forward to
and
it.
we can't wait to interview you.
I am looking forward to it.
Hey, Tori, let's go take it back to you.
Thanks, Chris. As we mentioned earlier, NOAA's GOES-S satellite is part of the GOES-R series. NOAA manages the GOES-R series program through an integrated NOAA-NASA office that is co-located at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. This office oversees the acquisition of the program's ground system, while NASA oversees the acquisition of the spacecraft, its instruments, and the launch vehicle. Lockheed Martin Space of Colorado built the spacecraft and is responsible for its development, integration, and testing. Mission operations will be performed by NOAA at their satellite operations facility in Maryland. Harris Corporation of Florida provided the main instrument, called the Advanced Baseline Imager, and the ground system, which includes the antenna system for receiving data. United Launch Alliance of Colorado is the provider of the Atlas V launch service. NASA's Launch Services Program, based at Kennedy Space Center in Florida, manages the agency's efforts to commercially provide rockets for science missions such as NOAA's GOES-S, and also directs the overall launch effort, including overseeing development and integration of the rocket with the spacecraft. Let's now go back to Atlas Launch Control for an update on the count. Josh and Mike, how are things progressing over there?
Thank you, Tori. Things are still progressing to a 5:02 p.m. liftoff of the Atlas V with NOAA's GOES-S. From Atlas Launch Control, we're just a few minutes away from entering, just about a minute away from entering a hold in the count. This is a planned 15-minute hold at the T-4 mark. Although the T-clock stops, launch teams continue to work diligently toward liftoff. The T-clock is the official countdown clock and is stopped at that mark in the countdown and holds for 15 minutes. At the end of the hold, both the T- and L- clocks will be synced, and only 4 minutes will remain until launch.
While we were away, we got an update from Launch Weather Officer Clay Flynn that we now have a 100% GO weather forecast for GOES-S. They've removed the constraint for cumulus clouds, so we have nothing to worry about on weather at this time. Everything is green. Additionally, NASA Launch Manager Tim Dunn has briefed the team that upper-level winds are not a constraint for the opening of today's launch window at 5:02. So at this point, not working any technical issues, and weather is go. We're approaching our T-4 minute hold. This is a planned built-in 15-minute hold in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. T-4 minutes and holding.
Seconds before liftoff of the United Launch Alliance Atlas V with NOAA's GOES-S spacecraft, the RD-180 engine ignites, supplied with fuel stored inside the large booster. The rocket gets extra power from the 4 solid rocket motors attached to the side at liftoff. In total, the rocket produces 2.25 million pounds of thrust.
Within 35 seconds of liftoff, the Atlas V will be traveling faster than the speed of sound. And within just 4 minutes, the rocket will weigh just a fraction of its original weight after it has jettisoned the solid rocket boosters, payload fairing, and the main Atlas booster. And just over 3.5 hours after liftoff, GOES-S will fly free above Earth.
Here's a detailed look at the full mission profile for today's launch of the Atlas V rocket.
The following profile details the important events of this mission using approximate times.
4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff.
The Atlas V RD-180 main engine and 4 solid rocket boosters ignite to generate the 2.25 million pounds of thrust to lift the rocket away from the pad. Shortly after liftoff, Atlas begins its initial pitch, yaw, and roll maneuvers to attain the proper ascent profile and minimize aerodynamic loads. The Atlas V reaches Mach 1, the speed of sound, at 35 seconds. At 47 seconds, the vehicle experiences maximum dynamic pressure. All 4 solid rocket boosters, or SRBs, are jettisoned at 1 minute 50 seconds. 1 minute 40 seconds later, the payload fairing is jettisoned. Approaching booster engine cutoff, the Atlas V burns propellant at a rate of 1,856 pounds per second, traveling at over 13,340 miles per hour, and is located 83 miles in altitude and 267 miles downrange. Booster engine cutoff occurs 4 minutes, 22 seconds after liftoff. 6 seconds later, the booster stage is jettisoned. The vehicle now weighs a little more than 5% of what it did at liftoff 4.5 minutes earlier. 10 seconds after booster separation, the first Centaur main engine start takes place. Cutoff of the Centaur main engine occurs just over 12 minutes after launch. The mission now enters a nearly 10.5-minute coast phase. At 22 minutes 38 seconds, the Centaur main engine is restarted. This burn will last 5.5 minutes. Following the second Centaur main engine cutoff at 28 minutes 9 seconds, the mission enters a 3-hour coast phase. Just over 3 hours 28 minutes after liftoff, the Centaur is started for a third and final burn. Approximately a minute and a half later, final cutoff of the Centaur main engine occurs. At 3 hours 32 minutes and 31 seconds, Centaur releases the GOES-S satellite for NOAA and NASA.
Inside of Atlas Launch Control, we are at T-minus 4 minutes and holding. We have about 11.5 minutes remaining before the terminal count to liftoff begins. About 15 minutes, 20 seconds from launch. And with that, we will go back to Tori. Tori?
Thanks, Mike. Kennedy's Marie Lewis had an opportunity to speak with Steve Volz, director of NOAA's Satellite and Information Service, about the newest addition to GOES-R satellite series.
Thank you. I'm here with Dr. Steve Volz, Director of NOAA's Satellite and Information Services. So, Doctor, tell us, if you could, how will today's launch impact our ability to observe and understand the planet?
Well, the GOES-17 launch, or GOES-S, soon to be GOES-17, is the second of a series of next-generation geostationary observing systems we're flying. GOES-16 launched about 14 months ago, and it's just revolutionized the way weather forecasters and the general public see environmental information. And it's hovering over the east coast of the United States, where it'll be in its permanent GOES-East position. GOES-17, or GOES-S, will be GOES-West, hovering over the west coast of the United States, providing that same kind of resolution, precision, and accuracy. And two of them together are just going to be a fantastic capability in orbit.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, in the last year and a half, NOAA has launched 3 next-generation satellites, including the GOES-S now. So can you talk about what this means in terms of our cooperation with other countries?
Sure. These satellites were decades, literally, in the building, in the design. We started in the mid-2000s for both series. So we're finally launching them, but it's a generational step in terms of capability on orbit. Our partners in space, the Japanese Met Agency, the European, the EUMETSAT organization, do similar steps, leap forward in technology. These put us back at the forefront in terms of meteorological capabilities from Earth orbit. We all share data, full, free, and open. We use their data in our models. They use our data. So we're all benefiting from this friendly competition to get the best observations from orbit.
And that data you're talking about really gives us such critical information to predict the weather and what's going to happen. So along those lines, what do you predict for the future of these satellites and the industry?
So this is, like I said, the first generational leap in capability for GEO in 20 plus years. So when you think about now the availability of information from satellites, from ground, from airplanes, from the whole Internet of Things, is going to allow a certain integration of information in a way that we can understand the Earth as a system much more holistically than ever before. It won't be just, here's a storm, here's a flood. It's seeing how they're all connected. So I think the next generation, the leaps will be in integration of all these great observing systems into a holistic view of how the Earth as an environment is working together.
All right, Doctor, thank you so much for your time. We'll send it back to you.
Today's mission is dedicated to 2 very special colleagues from United Launch Alliance and NASA's Launch Services Program, Gordon Meehan and Gene Forney. Gordon served our country in the United States Air Force, achieving the rank of Technical Sergeant. Gordon began his career as an electrical engineer at McDonnell Douglas, later working for both the Boeing Company and United Launch Alliance. United Launch Alliance dedicates this mission to their dear friend and colleague, Gordon Meehan. Gene worked in the Denver NASA resident office until his death last year at the age of 93. Gene served our country as an Army Air Corps pilot in World War II, completing 120 combat missions over Europe, and in the Cold War, helped put jet fighters on air carriers, along with training Navy and Marine pilots. When the space race started, Gene went to work for NASA, helping develop the Centaur cryogenic upper stage, a derivative of which is flying on today's mission. Gene served in multiple capacities throughout his NASA career, contributing to every Atlas mission since 1963. NASA's Launch Services Program dedicates this mission to their friend and teammate and a true American hero, Gene Forney. As we mentioned earlier, GOES-S is the second satellite in NOAA's latest generation of geostationary operational environmental satellites, known as the GOES-R series. Let's take a look at the processing journey of NOAA's GOES-S spacecraft leading up to today's launch. We would like to welcome those of you just joining us on Facebook Live. Here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida, the ULA Atlas V rocket and NOAA's GOES-S spacecraft are poised to lift off at 5:02 p.m. Eastern from Space Launch Complex 41 at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. Let's go now to Atlas Launch Control for an update. Mike and Josh?
Thank you, Tori, and welcome to those who are just joining our program for the live launch coverage of NOAA's GOES-S on an Atlas V rocket.
We have 8 minutes, 55 seconds before launch, and quickly let's get you up to speed. The Atlas V rocket on the launch pad at Space Launch Complex 41 is an Atlas V 541. It's one of the most powerful rockets in the Atlas fleet. It has a 5-meter fairing where the spacecraft is protected during ascent, 4 solid rocket motors providing extra lift to get the rocket and spacecraft off the ground, and a single-engine upper stage. The protective fairing also covers the Centaur second stage on this configuration of the rocket.
Right now, we are inside of a planned 15-minute hold in the launch countdown. The T-clock has paused, but the launch team continues to work through the final checks ahead of liftoff.
The Atlas booster and Centaur liquid oxygen tanks are at flight levels. Centaur liquid hydrogen is also at flight level.
The United Launch Alliance launch conductor, Ed Kidda, briefed the launch team ahead of the terminal count. Within the terminal count, should a condition exceed a launch constraint, teams are to notify by saying hold, hold, hold.
The launch conductor has verified with the range controller that solar radiation is also acceptable for launch. As we told you previously, weather is 100% go. No weather constraints at this time, and upper-level winds are also favorable. No technical issues are being worked at this time.
NOAA's GOES-S is on internal power. NASA launch manager Tim Dunn has polled his team. The Eastern Range has conducted its readiness polls. Launch conductor Ed Kidda has asked the NASA spacecraft coordinator to configure NOAA's GOES-S for launch, and launch director Tom Heater has conferred with mission managers for a go, no-go status. We're standing by for a final status check with all launch disciplines.
We're 7 minutes, 13 seconds away from launch. Launch conductor Ed Kidda will conduct a status check to continue the launch count and come out of our T-minus 4-minute hold.
Status check to proceed with terminal count. Atlas systems, propulsion. Go. Hydraulics. Go. Pneumatics. Go. LO2. Go. Water. Go. Centaur systems, propulsion. Go. Pneumatics. Go. LO2. Go. LH2.
Go.
HASGAS.
Go.
Electrical systems, airborne.
Go.
Ground.
Go.
Facility.
Go.
RFFTS.
Go.
Flight control.
Go.
GC cube.
Go.
COM.
Go.
Umbilicals.
Go.
ECS.
Go.
Redline monitor.
Go.
Quality.
Go.
Op safety manager.
Go.
ULA safety officer.
Go.
Vehicle system engineer.
Go.
Anomaly chief.
ACs go.
Range coordinator.
Clear to proceed.
Launch director.
You have permission to launch.
Proceeding with the count.
And as you heard, launch conductor Ed Kidda has received a go from all stations to continue the countdown. We're scheduled to release the hold in about 1 minute 45 seconds and countdown to an on-time liftoff of the United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket and NOAA's GOES-S spacecraft at 5:02 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
L minus 5 minutes, 30 seconds.
Start list data capture.
Roger.
NSC, verify spacecraft on internal power.
Spacecraft is on internal power.
All steps complete prior to terminal count.
The GOES-S spacecraft configured for launch on internal power. Everything is go. 5 minutes away from launch. We have 45 seconds remaining in this hold. Plan to come out of the hold and launch at the opening of a 2-hour launch window at 5:02 p.m. Eastern Time. NASA Launch Manager Tim Dunn just reporting to Launch Director that NASA is go for launch as well.
On my mark, the time will be T minus 4 minutes and counting.
4, 3, 2, 1. And we are at T minus 4 minutes and counting.
After launch, we'll be hearing the voice of United Launch Alliance's Marty Malinowski providing a status of the flight of the Atlas V and NOAA's GOES-S.
At launch minus 2 minutes, the Atlas and Centaur power will be internal.
Ground pyros have been enabled. Liquid oxygen securing and liquid oxygen topping are underway. Atlas tanks will be pressurized to flight pressure at T minus 3 minutes. Shortly thereafter, the flight termination system will go internal.
Atlas tanks to flight pressure.
Securing LO2 topping.
250.
FTS internal.
Following Atlas and Centaur power to internal at T minus 2 minutes, the ground launch sequencer will command the launch sequencer to start at T minus 1 minute 55 seconds. T minus 2 minutes 14 seconds and counting.
$159.
Vehicle internal.
155.
Launch sequencer start.
And the Atlas and Centaur power is now internal.
Centaur LH2.
Securing Centaur LO.
The flight termination system will be armed at T-minus 1 minute 37 seconds.
7.
FTS armed.
We are 1 minute, 30 seconds to launch.
The environmental control system will be reduced for launch at T-minus 1 minute 15 seconds.
1 minute 20 seconds.
OCU's armed.
FTS count started.
1:15.
Reduce ECS for launch.
Roger.
1:10.
Vent valves locked.
The vent valves are closed on the Centaur, liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen vent.
T-minus 1 minute.
Rock, report range status.
Range green.
Range operations controller reports range green. Everything is go. T-minus 51 seconds and counting.
T-minus 40 seconds.
Stable at step 3.
Closing in on 30 seconds before launch. 3 seconds before launch, the powerful RD-180 engine will ignite.
Roger.
25.
Status check.
Go Atlas.
Go Centaur. Go.
Everything is go. T-minus 15 seconds and counting.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff of the Atlas V and NOAA's GOES, a highly sophisticated weather-watching eye in the sky, to join its twin in providing better forecasts and saving lives.
Atlas has begun a pitch and yaw maneuver to steer to its planned path, an azimuth of 100.7 degrees.
At 35 seconds, the rocket carrying GOES will reach Mach 1, traveling faster than the speed of sound.
Down, right on schedule. Signatures look good. Roll program is complete. SRB chamber pressures are rolling off as expected.
At 47 seconds after launch, the vehicle will pass through the area of maximum dynamic pressure, or max Q.
Max Q.
This is the point when mechanical stress on the rocket reaches its peak because of the rocket's velocity and the resistance created by the Earth's atmosphere.
Booster has throttled up as expected.
You are also hearing the voice of United Launch Alliance flight commentator Marty Malinowski.
SRB chamber pressures continue to look good, have plateaued.
At 1 minute 50 seconds into flight, the first 2 solid rocket boosters will be jettisoned, followed about a second and a half later by
burnout.
other boosters.
And we have indication of SRB burnout. Booster engine continues to perform well. Approximately 10 seconds to SRB jettison. And we have indication of 4 solids jettisoning. Looks like a clean separation.
And a clean separation being reported of the solid rocket boosters.
Vehicle
We are
has
2
begun
minutes,
closed
4 seconds into
steering.
flight.
The next major milestone, 3 minutes 30 seconds into flight, the payload fairing protecting GOES during its flight through the atmosphere will be jettisoned 3.5 minutes after launch.
Booster has throttled down as expected. Up on the RCS pyro valve activation. We have the RCS pyro valve activation at this point. The system is pressurizing to flight levels. Signatures look good.
Three minutes into the flight.
And booster has throttled back to 2.5 Gs. preparation for payload fairing jettison.
Ten seconds away from payload fairing jettison.
On payload fairing jettison momentarily. And we have good payload fairing separation and CFLR jettison.
And we have a good payload fairing jettison, exposing GOES-S to space for the first time.
Signatures look good.
We are approaching 4 minutes into flight.
And booster has begun to throttle to 4.6 Gs in preparation for pico. Boost phase cooldown is underway. Logo pyro valve has been fired.
The call BECO stands for Booster Engine Cutoff. That will happen at 4 minutes 22 seconds into flight.
Boost phase chill down is complete. And we have pico. Shutdown looks good.
6 seconds after BECO, the Centaur second engine, or second stage will separate from the Atlas booster.
The RL-10 engine. GN2 purge firing. The RCS is underway. We have ignition and full thrust on the RL-10.
And the Centaur single-engine RL-10C engine ignites for the first time. It produces 22,900 pounds of thrust.
Our steering has been enabled. Body rates look good.
This is about a 7.5 minute burn of the Centaur RL-10C engine.
Fixed angle, as expected.
Engine cutoff planned for about 7 minutes from now. This is the first of 3 burns of the Centaur main engine.
Continue to warm towards bottle temperatures. Signatures look good. Centaur PU has gone to closed loop control. Current range track shows Centaur making good headway down the middle of the corridor. Current altitude is 129 miles. Downrange distance is 701 miles. Current velocity 13,903 miles per hour.
Listening to the voice of United Launch Alliance flight commentator Marty Malinowski describing the flight of the Atlas and Centaur.
Shows basically a nominal booster. Beginning to see the RCS thermal conditioning firing. Signatures look good. RL-10 continues to perform well. Chamber pressures, lax pump discharge, and fuel venturi, all appropriate for the mark.
We're 7 minutes into the flight of GOES-S. Another 5 minutes remaining in this first burn of the Centaur single engine.
Small loss of data has resumed. All signatures look good across the dropout. Current altitude is 146 miles. Downrange distance 1094. Current velocity is 14,685.
Eight minutes after liftoff, and everything continues to go well.
have about 4 more minutes left in the burn of the Centaur main engine cuts off. That would be called MECO 1.
Oxidizer-rich condition. EC, ox pump discharge, and fuel venturi all look good. Centaur tank pressures remain stable. Storage bottle pressures look good. Batteries are also good. Body rates controlling right down the middle. Each track continues to show good progress down the middle of the corridor.
3 minutes remaining in this burn of the Centaur engine.
Centaur main engine burn continues to look very good. Chamber pressures, ox pump discharge, and fuel venturi all within expected parameters.
And we are 10 minutes into flight.
Hydrazine line temperatures have nearly achieved bottle outlet temperatures at this point. Continue to see light RCS firings. Still running slightly oxidizer rich at this point in the burn. A little less than 2 minutes remain in this burn. All systems look good. And Centaur is now commanding a nominal MR, having worked off the excess oxidizer error.
About 1 minute remaining in this burn of the Centaur main engine.
Centaur main engine continues to look good.
Standing by for the first of 3 burns of the Centaur main engine to cut off, also known as MECO 1.
Good. 4S settling motors on. CRDs have been safed.
And we have MECO.
Fuel tank pressures have been vented down.
About 12 and a half minutes into flight. We'll be in a coast phase for about the next 10 minutes prior to relighting the Centaur second stage engine for the second of 3 times today.
Centaur is continue its turn to MES 2 attitude.
From Atlas Launch Control, I'm here with Scott Messer, United Launch Alliance Program Manager. Scott, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. And tell us a little bit how this launch is going so far.
Well, so far it is going almost perfectly. The count was very quiet today. In fact, probably the quietest count that I've been through. Actually, from a personal note, the only real big excitement for me was the birth of my fourth grandson this afternoon at T-minus 3 hours and 30 minutes.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, so that's exciting for me. But the count was very quiet, and so far met all the milestones. Everything is looking good.
And so far for this year for United Launch Alliance, this is your third launch in 2018.
It is our third launch, and it's a great year. It's a big, busy year for NASA, and we've got a lot of interesting missions working with NASA. The GOES mission, of course, is our third mission this year, as you said, and we've at United Launch Alliance actually launched every GOES mission that has ever launched since 1975. So it's very exciting. We're in the middle of a 3-minute the first coast now. We'll go into a 5-minute burn after that, and then we'll go into a 3-hour coast where we put GOES into the geostationary transfer orbit. Some fun facts. As we finish this second burn, the vehicle will be traveling about 22,000 miles per hour. To put that in perspective, that would be about 7.5 minutes coast to coast from LA to New York. So it's moving pretty quickly. And at liftoff, the vehicle weighed about 1.2 million pounds. We have about 2.25 million pounds of thrust that gets the vehicle going. And as I said, we're excited to be part of the GOES mission. It's a great mission for the nation, and helps a lot of people with improved weather predictions.
And so after GOES is in its orbit, what's next for United Launch Alliance?
So as I mentioned, we've got a very busy year with NASA. Coming up in May, we've got the InSight mission, which will be the first Mars mission to ever launch from the West Coast. So that's an exciting activity, followed on in July 31st with Parker Solar Probe mission that will touch the sun, and then finally we'll end out our year with NASA with our last and final Delta II mission, the ISAT mission out of Vandenberg in September. So it's a busy year for us and a lot of excitement coming up.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today, and congratulations on launch so far, and also your other news.
Yes,
good to
thank
hear.
you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you for being with us.
All right, thank you.
Centaur has achieved a 60% 4S duty cycle at this point. Signatures look good.
19 minutes, 22 seconds into the flight of GOES-S. Everything continues to go well as the Centaur upper stage ferries GOES-S to its final destination in space. Standing by for the second stage engine restart at a mission elapsed time of 22 minutes, 38 seconds. So about 3 minutes from now.
And Centaur has gone to 100% for settling in preparation for S2. Tank pressures are being increased as well. One minute to S2.
And 1 minute before the Centaur second stage ignites again. GOES will eventually be in a geosynchronous orbit, which is an orbit that keeps the satellite over a specific location on Earth. By maintaining a hovering position over a fixed point on Earth's surface, GOES are able to constantly monitor atmospheric conditions in a particular portion of Earth's atmosphere.
"30 seconds away from the Centaur second stage engine restart." Again, this is a burn known as MES2, main engine start 2, for the Centaur main engine. We'll hear the call from Marty Malinowski.
We have ignition and full thrust on the Arrow-10. This burn is currently scheduled for a duration of 350.5 seconds.
And as you heard, we have a good main engine start, 2.
U has been enabled and currently commanding in oxidizer-rich condition. Chamber pressures, LOX pump discharge, and fuel venturi all look good.
This burn will last about 5 more minutes.
Hydrazine lines are at bottle temperatures at this point. Tank pressures look good. Storage bottles and batteries are as well. Centaur's current altitude is 112 miles, downrange distance 5,470 miles, current velocity 18,544 miles per hour. Continue to see our RCS thermal conditioning firing. Signatures look good.
We are 24 minutes, 30 seconds into flight. The RL-10 engine continues to fire during its second of 3 burns.
Systems are performing as expected.
Three minutes remaining in this burn of the Centaur main engine.
EU continues to control near nominal, having worked off the excess oxidizer. RL-10 these look very good at this point in the burn. Two minutes remaining in this burn. All systems continue to look very good. Operating as expected. Burn altitude 132 miles, downrange distance 6,291 miles, velocity 20,954 miles per hour.
GOES-S has successfully traversed the Atlantic Ocean, and as you can see, is now making its way along the west coast of Africa. Continuing its ascent and its eastward trek to its final destination in space later this evening when it reaches its geosynchronous transfer orbit.
.30 seconds to MECO. RL-10 continues to look good. MR controlling near nominal. RCS line temperatures look good. We have MECO. Shutdown looks good. We have Forest settling.
And there is one more burn remains before NOAA's GOES-S separates. The third and final burn takes place after a nearly 3-hour coast phase.
So with the successful Centaur engine cutoff and the beginning of the long coast phase, we will now turn things back over to Tori, and later this evening we'll be back here at Atlas Launch Control. Tori?
Thanks, guys. We'll see you after the coast phase. The GOES-R series features important technology upgrades and advancements. Blair Allen from NASA Edge is on set with NOAA's Jim Yo, Chief Administrative Officer for the Joint Center for Satellite Data Assimilation. Blair?
Thanks so much, Tori. Jim, first thing I got to ask you is, tell me, what do you think of the launch?
Well, this is my first launch live. It was really exciting, I got to say. But I'll tell you the truth, I'm even more excited about the work that's coming up for me and my colleagues putting these new data to work for better forecast and warnings for the American public.
Well, it's interesting because John Leslie, who works for NOAA, told us you were the weather satellite expert. So I imagine, from your perspective, with all these new advancements, you have to be very excited about the things that you're going to be able to do now that when GOES-S becomes operational.
Absolutely, and of course we started seeing some of the promise of this from GOES-R. We saw the benefits that we were hoping we would get from having the advancements from the advanced baseline imager with more channels, allowing it to differentiate more features in the atmosphere and on the ocean and land surface, from having better resolution that could help us, see the fine structure of storms and wildfires and any number of things like that, and finally having the rapid scanning that 5 times as often as the previous generation of GOES that help us see the evolution of storms. And give more timely warnings.
Well, okay, now speaking of that, just give us a sense. I mean, I know it's fast, but how fast are we talking when you think about being able to see something happening in the data on the satellite when it's really happening on the ground?
Right, it's almost instantaneous. In fact, this is really for near real-time warnings and information being passed to the public and to decision makers. We're actually able to scan small areas of the country, 2 of them from each of the GOES-R and GOES-S satellites simultaneously with a 1-minute resolution. So when you have something that's happening really fast, such as a developing storm system, you can focus in on that and be getting images every 1 minute. So you can see when cumulus clouds are piling up and overshooting the top. That's really an indication of a really strong thunderstorm with the potential for spawning really severe weather. We're able to see that in real time, know where that is, and give really effective warnings.
And just real quick, to understand that, the beauty with the GOES-R series actually is you don't have to remove the satellites. You just start focusing on areas of interest, correct?
Exactly. I mean, you're able to scan an entire almost hemisphere from each of these, and what you do to do that rapid scanning is you just focus on part of that scan and refresh the whole disk, as we call it, more slowly. A neat thing coming up now, though, of course, is we'll have one centered over the eastern United States and one over the west, and this is going to give us coverage all the way from as far west as New Zealand, as far east as the western coast of Africa, up to Alaska and down to the tip of South America.
Which is absolutely perfect. It looks like GOES-S and GOES-R are giving us perfect coverage. Thanks so much, Jim. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure being here.
Tori, back to you, and tell Mike Curie he's got a ticket to ride.
Thanks, Blair. That was a great overall look at NOAA's GOES-R program and the ULA Atlas V rocket that lifted off with NOAA's GOES-S satellite just moments ago. We are now in the midst of the coast phase. When we come back, we will learn more about NOAA's GOES-S mission and check back in with Josh and Mike in Atlas Launch Control to take us through the remaining milestones, including spacecraft separation and solar array deploy. For now, let's take another look at today's launch.
Nine, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff of the Atlas V and NOAA's GOES-S, a highly sophisticated weather watching eye in the sky, to join its twin in providing better forecasts and saving lives. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff of the Atlas V and NOAA's GOES, a highly sophisticated weather-watching eye in the sky, to join its twin in providing better forecasts and saving lives.
Atlas has begun a pitch and yaw maneuver to steer to its planned path, an azimuth of 100.7 degrees.
At 35 seconds, the rocket carrying GOES will reach Mach 1, traveling faster than the speed of sound.
Throttle down, right on schedule. Signatures look good. Roll program is complete. The speed chamber pressures are rolling off as expected.
At 47 seconds after launch, the vehicle will pass through the area of maximum dynamic pressure, or max Q.
Max Q.
This is the point when mechanical stress on the rocket reaches its peak because of the rocket's velocity and the resistance created by the Earth's atmosphere.
Nine, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff of the Atlas V and NOAA's GOES, a highly sophisticated weather-watching eye in the sky, to join its twin in providing better forecasts and saving lives.
Atlas has begun a pitch and yaw maneuver to steer to its planned path, an azimuth of 100.7 degrees.
At 35 seconds, the rocket carrying GOES will reach Mach 1, traveling faster than the speed of sound.
Throttle down, right on schedule.